it.
Well, Supreme Leader's channel got banned.
Supreme Leader uploaded one of these videos of the Atheist Experience of us doing this very thing, and he got hit within 24 hours. He got hit with a copyright strike, and they didn't even give him a strike. They took his channel down. So
I did it once just with the Godless Engineer, but he was live streaming and I was restreaming at the same time the live stream. And then I got the strike and I said, hey, please retract your strike because otherwise it's bad for me. And he accepted my apology and it was retracted. And I don't have any strike anymore. So I mean, if you are concerned of that, you can come to my channel. I open it up for you, and we can do it. I have no problem with it.
Well, to answer your question, Darth, I don't know if you have a video private, if it can be copyright struck or not.
No. I'm talking about if you just live stream it, but that you don't allow it to be public.
Yeah, if it's private, I don't know.
They really shouldn't be harassing you guys anyways, because as long as it's just not like you're just reproducing it, you're allowed to comment if you're doing it for financial purposes.
Yeah, I know you're allowed to comment. There's a fine line as to what is fair use. Okay.
Yeah, you have to comment every certain number of seconds, and if you go over that number of seconds, it's not considered fair use. You can get a copyright strike.
Yeah, it's a walking a tightrope.
You know how many seconds that they're
No, I don't. I don't know, but I know that they do it by seconds, which is amazing.
I think it's 27 seconds or something like that.
As I told you, Darth, I think that your line of reasoning is interesting, but I think there are some concepts which are difficult to be understood. I, as an outsider, I am new to that kind of press-up thinking. And I have difficulties, and I can fully understand atheists which have the same difficulties. That's what I'm saying.
But keep in mind, Montangelo, biblical presuppositional reasoning it's biblical. All we're simply doing is we are always in our thinking, we are starting with the revelation of God. Okay? Now, that may not always be explicit on our lips, okay? But everything we say, go ahead, Parakeet.
In a way, it's changing your perspective from that of the world to that of God.
The problem, listen. In the biblical view, which is the biblical presuppositional view, that Van Til always made a point to teach his students. One of the big issues always was the creator-creature distinction. Okay, this is paramount in our thinking. At every waking moment, we always have to keep in mind, look, I'm holding a pen in my hand. I must not think of this pen, okay, as just simply existing, right? Or that the pen just simply exists alongside God within the sphere or realm of reality, right? We have to see that reality is eternal God, who is self-contained, right? Has no beginning, and then he institutes the world with all of its particulars, and then imposes the categories, right? So that this pen, okay, when I pick up this pen, I have to be cognizant that this pen is not, I will either conceive of this pen to it just simply exists according to some parameters, or that this pen exists in terms of parameters that are imposed by God. This pen is a creature of God. Dogs are a creature of God. Okay? Snakes are creatures of God. Right? Everything that God creates is a creature of God. You know, some are sentient, some are not. But biblical presuppositionalism challenges the popular Western view of Greek philosophy that if you believe in God or you don't believe in God, we're thinking of everything, including God, as somehow engulfed or encapsulated by some parameter of existence. All right? But that is not biblical. See, what is revolutionary about Van Til's presuppositional apologetics is because he is ruthlessly faithful to the biblical text. And he doesn't try to combine biblical reasoning with a Greek outlook on metaphysics, okay? Where God is simply the supreme being, but he's not consciously conceived of as being ultimate. You understand the difference? In other words, in the biblical view, God is not subject to any singular or multiple parameter of anything, whereas we are subject to the parameters of his creation and God himself. So we always have to, the biblical presuppositional view, see, this is not common to people's thinking. This is the influence of the world, okay? So when we talk about God, we're not talking about God as the ultimate absolute, okay? We're just talking about God as though he were simply the supreme being. You understand the difference between God being ultimate and supreme? If God is ultimate, then by definition he's supreme. But God could be conceived of as being, quote, the supreme being, but not ultimate, where God himself is in some way contained in one aspect, one parameter or more of reality that everything is subject to.
If they want to replace God, then there are not many alternatives. And usually what they resort to is either they don't know, they say, oh, I don't know. The other one is the God, the universe is eternal, or the universe had a beginning but no cause. That are basically the options and the answers which we are provided with.
See, some Christians, and this is what rocked my world, is they'll acknowledge that God is the creator, right? But they'll think of God as the creator in the kind of the way that Aristotle viewed God, where he's just simply the prime organizer and mover, and he's the biggest, he's the baddest, and I mean that kind of tongue-in-cheek, smartest, okay? He gets the ball rolling, this is his, theme park, so to speak. That is not the same thing as the creator-creature distinction. And so at any given moment, see, and Van Til, if you read Van Til, an analysis of his thought, and I encourage everybody who wants to understand biblical presuppositional apologetics, this is one book that is a must read, okay? And I have an electronic copy of it, all right? If anybody wants a copy of it. And John Frame, I love the guy, great guy. Very humble, great teacher. When you read this book, he really understands Van Til, but he's not uncritical. He criticizes Van Til in a number of ways, but he does so with somebody with love and admiration and deep devotion to his mentor. And one of the things he points out is that he felt that Van Til, his strong point was focusing on constant antithesis, that there's an antithesis between certain beliefs and concepts. And he said he felt that Van Til did this too much. But even though from Frame's point of view he did this too much, the fact is it at least did it to the degree that he did, that Christians are not doing this. We have to constantly understand the antithesis in worldviews, the antithesis not of a dispute about the facts, but the dispute about the antithesis in the philosophy of facts. How are we going to understand what is the context of facts at all before we can even talk about what facts are? And so what these guys are doing...
Wait a minute. This is what you just said is, most people will not interrupt you, but I am interrupting you because I don't understand.
No, that's fine. I don't mind that because you're not being obtuse, you're not trolling, so that's fine. Go ahead.
Can you say that again, what you just said right now?
I said I don't mind when people interrupt if they're not trolling.
No. Previously, what you explained.
No, what I'm saying is, when we go to the Bible, right? We have to look at what does the Bible say here or there from Genesis to Revelation. And then we have to ask ourselves, okay, what are the implications and ramifications to this, right? And the ramifications of what God...
Darth,
Go
the
ahead.
main thing that atheists always ask for is evidence. Where is your evidence? That's what they ask all
well,
the
here's
time.
the problem. Well, here's the problem. Okay, so let's bring this in here. So not only is there a dispute about facts, there's a dispute, there's an unstated antithesis between the believer and the unbeliever about the philosophy of fact. You can't talk about facts until you have a concept of the philosophy of fact. And in order to have a philosophy of fact, you have to have a metaphysic. You have to have a model of reality. So when they insist on facts, here's the issue, right? We always have, we never try to adopt a neutral position, right? We can have common ground because we're made in the image of God, but we never try to reason neutrally, right? Because either our reasoning will be in conformity to the mind of God and how he reveals it in natural special revelation, or it won't be. So
Okay,
when it comes to, let me just finish.
Okay.
No, let me just finish here. So when the unbelievers are talking about evidence, what is the mental motivation from that? What that stems from first and foremost is the autonomous reasoning, that they do not want there to be a God. When somebody holds to autonomous human reasoning, they already are committed that they do not want there to be a God. Because if they did want there to be a God, they would realize, okay, my thinking has to be in conformity to God. When these people say, oh, I want to believe the truth, I just don't have the evidence, they are deceiving themselves, and we cannot accept that as valid. Now, I'm not saying you have to argue with that particular point at that time, but we have to be cognizant of the fact that these are not honest players. These are people who see the entire. Listen. When they say, we want evidence, show me evidence for God, do you know that inherent in that request, implicit in that request, is the denial of the existence of God?
Yes, so let's role play here.
You understand what I just said to you?
Yes, I think.
Do you agree with it?
Always, well, what they want is actually an answer. Which
do you agree with what I just said? That when they say, give me evidence for God, implicit within that demand is the denial of the existence of God.
In multiple different ways, in multiple different lines of reasoning you can use to show that.
So when they say, listen, because you see, when we survey all of the facts that we're acquainted with, morning, noon, and night, okay?
By the way, you say what they want is evidence. That's not that's what they assert they want.
Yes, yeah, that's what they claim, but that's not
the
really.
Thing is, how do we answer? That's the thing.
I'm going to explain. Well, you answer it. We answer it in a biblically presuppositional manner, because when you do it purely and evidentially, okay, it is presenting evidentialism as opposed to biblical presuppositionalism. There's not an antithesis where one side discusses historical evidences or contemporary evidences and the other side doesn't. No, we're for discussing evidences. The objection to the evidentialist position and the classical position is that they are subtly and even unconsciously, and I'll put that in quotation marks, catering to one or more false beliefs about the realm of existence. Okay? We must not cater to their false beliefs. Okay? So at any given moment, whatever fact is in view, it will either be conceptualized as a God fact, God-created fact, or it will be adopted as being that it exists independently of God. Maybe God exists, but I'm just going to hold that the pen just simply exists without any ultimate designation. Right?
That's what they try to claim. They say there is a multiverse. The fine-tuning is explained by multiverses.
The point is this. Okay, people who debate evidentially, as powerful as it may be for some people who are apt to becoming a Christian, maybe the Holy Spirit is working on somebody. You can use probabilistic reasoning that's very powerful. ultimately, at the end of the road, at the final analysis, you can't strictly reason probabilistically. Ultimately, is because what would ground that anything is unchanging? In order to reason probabilistically, there has to be some things that don't change along that with other things that do.
Are you aware that when they say, "Can you show me evidence?" that they are implicitly asserting multiple different things that are false? When they ask that question, they're making assertions implicitly.
Yeah, don't just focus.
The thing
They
is,
are asserting that all the other things they've seen are not evidence. They are asserting that evidence can exist absent God. They're making assertions.
The thing is, I mean, in my experience, and I debate atheists for decades, I can provide the most powerful reasoning why materialism doesn't withstand scrutiny, and positive evidence why intelligent design and creationism is the superior explanatory framework. At the end of the day, they will simply say, well, I don't believe you. Or they will say, I don't know. Or whatever. They will always find an excuse and reject what you're saying. That is what I experience.
All right, I'll be back in a second. I'm just trying to get somebody a book.
Oh, Tangelo, do you go witnessing on the street or something?
Okay. The problem is that Christians, it is very easy, even for the most dedicated of Christians, to drift somewhat into a Greek outlook on reality while still believing in the God of the Bible, right? And what that means is that we're conceiving that God is the king of the universe, God is supreme, and that he's the prime mover. But we have to understand that all facts are God's facts, because it wouldn't be a fact unless it was a part of his revelation and his redemptive plan in history. And all Van Til is doing is he's just showing the ramifications and implications of certain basic biblical doctrines that are abandoned when Christians attempt to evangelize and even defend the faith. Okay, they're well-meaning, right? I mean, I used to do it, right? The point is that we can take certain evidential lines of reasoning, and as long as we do it in a biblical presuppositional manner, then it rescues it from compromising to the unbeliever's false beliefs. Okay?
The thing is, when you claim or when you say to an atheist, well, you know that God exists, but you are suppressing the truth.
No, that's going to come at the tail end. That's going to come at the tail end when I show them that the grounds that they claim that they're atheists, they don't really follow, right? That they say, well, I need a reason to believe in God. I say, okay, let's look at God from a philosophical perspective, okay? God is that which is fundamental and ultimate and the source of all possibility. I need a reason for that ultimate. When they lack belief in God because their criterion of belief is not fulfilled, they're not sitting in an empty vacuum or mental void. They're still operating from a model of reality where something is going to have to be, in their model of reality, something is going to have to be fundamental and absolute. Because if nothing, conceptually speaking, even in a vague way, is to be absolute, then there cannot be any intelligibility for anything. Because then everything is going to be in a state of flux. Some things have to remain the same.
I don't understand
while other
that.
things.
By
Absolute,
absolute,
flux,
Darth uses the word absolute to mean unchanging.
Okay, and Tangelo, Have you ever seen YouTube videos where they play pranks?
No.
Okay, well, look up some YouTube videos. They have some funny YouTube videos that get millions of views where they just pull practical jokes on people, where somebody will think that they're in a particular situation
pranks,
or whatever,
yeah,
and then they
pranks.
they change it,
Okay.
right? But the person doesn't know that it's changed, right? So, I mean, I could give numerous examples, but here's the thing: is suppose suppose somebody thinks that a belief or an entity in question is not changing intrinsically, right? Ontologically in itself, it's not changing, while other parameters are changing. So, in order to reason, you have to presuppose that certain things aren't changing, while others are. Because if everything is changing, not just some things, not just like, if everything is changing, then what is a dog would not be the same thing now as it was yesterday. Okay?
Okay.
Certain things have to be regular and unchanging, while other things do change. So it's a mixture. It's called the principle of continuity and principle of discontinuity, right? If everything was changing from moment to moment, everything was changing, there could not be predication, there couldn't be intelligibility. Conversely, if nothing was changing, there couldn't be intelligibility. So if everything is changing, there's no intelligibility. If nothing is changing, there would be no intelligibility, and everything is changing, there would be no intelligibility. Intelligibility requires, okay, from our human perspective,
and an actor.
It requires the principle of continuity and discontinuity. Now, that continuity means that something's going to have to be absolute, okay? And whatever that absolute is, that is unchanging, that is it itself is imposing certain regularities that do not change over time while permitting others, okay? But the unbeliever,
these are new.
Listen to me.
Concepts.
The reason why the uniformity of nature and the causal principle are intelligible in a Christian worldview is because we have an unchanging eternal God who then institutes creation according to his plan, and he implements the principle of continuity along with discontinuity. All right? Now, continuity and the discontinuity come from God's redemptive plan of creation. But the unbeliever is simply when he's reasoning about things, like if he said, oh, a dog bit my neighbor, right? This is presupposing that the word neighbor and dog are actually ontologically the same sort of things that they were yesterday and a week before. Not talking about what we call it, the token, the word dog or neighbor. I'm talking about what neighbor and dog are ontologically. All right? Now.
Before you go on, does anyone know why A Spaz is muted?
Well, probably for trolling, but we'll let him.
Hello.
He might have had an open mic.
Thanks for asking, mate.
Yeah, he might have had an open mic yesterday, so.
He said a series of things, Darth.
Oh, I know why. He was muted because he was a spaz.
Yeah, well.
There you go.
Inclusion in the name, isn't it?
Okay, so when the unbelievers, like these two schmucks here, okay, one with a PhD, one without, when they reason about anything, they have to presuppose the principle of continuity and discontinuity. But what imposes that? Why? Just because they believe it? Look, suppose there's a YouTube gag video, and let's say suppose they have an object that's very heavy and they can't lift it. Well, let's say it's a bodybuilder and he can't lift this object. It's very heavy. And then in the video, and by the way, what I'm giving you, hypothetical, there are videos like this on YouTube. So the bodybuilder tries to lift this heavy object. And then the pranksters distract him and they swap the object for another object that appears to be the same, but it doesn't have the same mass or weight. And then a little girl comes by and picks up the heavy object and walks away. Now the bodybuilder is dumbfounded. Why? Why is he dumbfounded? It's because in his mind, the object that she picked up was the same object that he tried to lift. And in his mind, he concluded that the object that she picked up in that time index was the same object that he attempted to lift, that it's the same thing ontologically. But ontologically, it was not. All right? This is just an illustration. So in order for unbelief...
I was going to say he was expecting continuity. He wasn't expecting the weight to spontaneously change.
He was not expecting.
Right.
He was not having an expectation that the object in question ontologically changed.
If he did have that,
so when the little girl picks up, the object, whatever it is, let's say it's a heavy barbells, and when they distract him, they swap it out with fake barbells that are really light. He's in shock and dismay. Wait a minute, because he believes that it is the same ontological object. Okay? And so he'll say, how could she pick that up? Right? Because he believed that, and by the way, in any given moment, he knows that the air is moving in the room. He believes that there's discontinuity, there's time, things are going on, people are breathing. He's fully aware that there's changing in his world. Little children are aware of this. But in order to reason, we're also aware that there's also continuity, ontological continuity. So there's the continuity and discontinuity. So to reason about our world, right, continuity and discontinuity has to be real. Now, does something possess ontological continuity merely because we believe it? Because if that's the case, then that little girl shouldn't have been able to pick up that object. But because the object ontologically changed, it was swapped out, right? What if one instance the object in question changes mass, right? Let's say it's the same object, but for some reason its mass changes, right? The point is simply this.
You were talking about how even unbelievers, you were talking about turning their criteria of belief on them when they lack belief in what's ultimate is personal. They have to believe something else is ultimate. And
so in order to reason about this world, we have to believe that there is something fundamental, ultimate, and absolute, and it has to be God. But the unbeliever says, well, here's my criterion of belief. I want you to prove this to me, that what is fundamental, the core of continuity, the core of that, what is ultimate and absolute, you got to prove that to me.
Well, and they don't go to that length, Darth.
Let me finish. Listen, I'm talking about, let me finish. So they say, in order for me to accept your version of what is fundamental, your flavor, right? You got to prove to me that what you are saying is fundamental to existence is personal. And in the absence of you fulfilling my criterion of belief that what is fundamental is personal, I'm going to reject that. But they're not standing in a neutral position, because in order to reason at all, there's going to have to be something that's fundamental. But since they don't believe that it is personal, then by default, they will be believing that what is fundamental is impersonal. And this is a true dichotomy. So either you're going to believe, even children think this way, either children are going to believe that what is fundamental, or adults, what is fundamental is personal, or it's going to be impersonal. This does not take place, at a high conscious level. But the unbeliever, when they go around in life, they believe in the principle of continuity and discontinuity, and these things stem from whatever is fundamental to reality. Now, so now they're operating from the principle that there's something fundamental and it's impersonal, but I won't believe that what's fundamental is personal until you prove it. But what proved that what is fundamental is impersonal? The answer is nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, they never go to that, Darth, because they just do not scrutinize their own worldview without God. They just say, I want evidence that your God exists, but they don't want evidence that the world without God is even possible.
No, but the point is, what is there? Wait a minute. So we have to ask ourselves, what is our God? Our God, the God of the Bible, is that which is fundamental, foundational, and ultimate, the source of what's possible and impossible. Now, they in order for them to reason, they certainly believe that certain things are impossible. Because if nothing's impossible, it's over. You can't reason about anything. So the point is this.
Possible.
The point is what proved to them that what is fundamental is impersonal. The point of me bringing this up is to show them that their criterion of belief is a smokescreen. It's a verbal distraction. So
I am getting your line of reasoning, Darth, but it's not easy to grasp, and it is not common thinking.
That's because you're accustomed. That's because you are accustomed about thinking about your world with a combination of biblical as well as secular thinking, and secular thinking is Greek thought. In Greek thought, everything that we identify is subject to some wider parameter that even God is subject to, like the law of non-contradiction.
I think if you want to learn more too about this, you should just read some of the books that Darth has recommended.
Yeah, you have those books. Okay?
Darth, I wanted to.
It's not very complicated. The reason.
I did read a good part of the book which you sent to me.
The reason why it is sometimes difficult is because people have not been taught to think this way from the time they were children. Okay?
He was trying to make a point.
Darth, have you heard of the book, The Trinity and the Vindication of the Christian Paradox by Bosserman?
Yeah, I have that. Yes, I have. I've read it.
Do you think that's a better starting point book as opposed
Absolutely
to the one you
not. No.
Okay, so
that's something that you should... That you should read the Trinity and the Paradox by Bosserman only after you have read Bonson's material and have a good understanding of that metaphysic. Because
what about what
if you I'm trying to answer you.
Yeah,
okay, I can't answer in a soundbite.
Go ahead.
If somebody just out of the blue starts reading that book, they're going to read about a chapter of it. Their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to put it down. You have to have a groundwork of concepts, right, before you can go into that. Because Bosserman's book it's not only brilliant, but it relies on the acquisition of certain foundational biblical presuppositional concepts.
Okay, well, the one by John M. Frame, would you say that's a good foundational starting point then?
Which book?
The one you just sent me, Van Til's an analysis of his thoughts.
No, that is a good place to understand Van Til from a broader perspective. If you want a good introduction to biblical presuppositional, the biblical position, biblical presuppositional is just simply being biblical, right? But it is showing what the biblical presuppositionalism is basically showing what the biblical ramifications are of a biblical worldview and how they apply to every area of life. And people are not accustomed to that, right? So the best place to start for somebody who's a beginner is with Every Thought Captive by Richard Pratt.
Yeah, I've read that one. I think I have
okay. Then move on. Read Pushing the Antithesis.
Pushing the Antithesis by Greg
Okay.
Thompson.
Yeah, and then read Against All Opposition.
Okay.
Right? Now, those two books are significantly overlapping in thematic material, right? And then once you start to get this down, then you can understand some of these things. What we're saying is not this is not esoteric knowledge. It is just simply because even Christians and religious people who believe in God have been so influenced by Greek philosophy, it's permeated every area of our life, okay? Even by people who are devoutly religious, where they will conceive of God in somewhat of an Aristotelian view, as opposed to a strictly biblical view where there's the constant creator-creature distinction, right? So, for example, how often does everybody think that for any fact that exists, this is a God-created fact? No, they just want to think of God as the prime mover. God is the supreme being. God is the savior. Okay? He's the judge. But you see, central to God, more than anything, is the creator-creator distinction. Now, Christians will pay lip service to this, but the creator-creation distinction must be of central importance in everything that we think at every given moment. And if we don't, then we will be drifting into a Greek philosophical outlook that is an amalgamation or a mixture of Greek philosophy and a biblical worldview. And people who engage in strict evidentialism, they mean well, they may be very brilliant, and in fact, many of the evidences that they give for the Christian faith may be very good evidences, okay? But the evidence are presented in a way that compromise one or more important biblical doctrines without realizing it, and they're capitulating to unbelievers' false views. Right?
Darth, one thing which I thought is important in the book, which you gave me, the Every Thought Captive, is that the author says that every person has an inner knowledge of God's existence, and that we all know that God exists. And that's in basically Romans 1, 19 to 23, where it says that we suppress the truth. Now, the thing is, when I say to an atheist, you're suppressing the truth because you know God exists, that will give you vehement reactions against, and they will deny vehemently what you're saying.
That's why you have to make an appeal to that. Now, I'm not saying that always do it this way, but you have to do that as a closing. Right? You have to sit there after you show them that their rejection of the Christian worldview and their rationale is incoherent on its own terms. Then you say to them, so your belief in not God is arbitrary? And they're like, no, it's not arbitrary. I say, good. Then the only other reasonable explanation that you hold to this not God view when it's not arbitrary, but you don't have rational grounds for your not God position, is because you have a deeply rooted motivation that you don't want there to be a God. You are suppressing the truth of creation all around you, and you have decided, rather than conclude that all the facts of creation are indicative of God, including your self-consciousness, because without God being the creator in endowing us with being self-conscious, then it would be meaningless to speak of ourselves as self-conscious, meaningful beings that aren't made in the image of God. It would be unintelligible. All right.
Well,
so then you need. I'm not saying don't ever bring it in the beginning, but it is better to use it as a closing statement when we show them on their own terms their position is incoherent. So why would somebody hold to an incoherent position? Once they have been shown it's incoherent, is because they are suppressing the truth and unrighteousness.
And how do you address that? I mean, in my understanding, the main reason that people reject God is emotional. It's not evidence-based. So they have some emotional commitment against God.
It's worse than that. Yeah, it's emotional, but it's worse than that. It's a pride issue. It's rebellion. When they claim it's an evidence issue, it is not. Because all they have to do is they'll say, well, I have yet to be presented for evidence for God. But then what we have to do, because I've learned from Van Til and Bonson, to say, okay, let's look at the statement that they make. what are the implications and ramifications of what they're saying? When they say, I have been yet to be presented with evidence, they're talking about everything in the world they're acquainted with, and they've decided that it is not necessary to reference God as the precondition of these facts in order for the facts to be facts. Well, how'd they determine that? It doesn't matter. They go, oh, you're shifting the burden of proof. No, I'm simply asking you to unpack what you're saying. And they don't want to do that. All they want to do is spit out cliches. I talked with a scumbag atheist last night. His name is Oz. I attempted, this was not the first time. I've talked with him several times. He had no interest in having an adult interaction with me. Okay? He basically was not responding to anything that I was saying. He just says, prove your God, 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 prove your God. And I pointed out to him that his very self-consciousness, the fact that he accepts that he is a rational cognitive being, is all the proof that he needs that God exists. Because if that is not accepted, that the only way that we could be conscious agents is if we are imbued and endowed by what is fundamental as a conscious agent. If they reject that, then there won't be rational grounds to conclude that we are rational agents in a chance world. In a chance world, meaning a not God world, there's no grounds for rationality.
What they claim is that the brain produced the mind.
What they do, okay, and what he did last night, all they just simply do is they're not interested in it being proven to God, okay? All they want you to do is just say, oh, look at the pretty stars, look at the fine tuning, and then they go, I am proving it to them above and beyond individual facts by saying that in order for things to be facts, we have to have rational acquisition of it. In order for us to have rational acquisition as rational players, we have to be endowed with rational faculties. How do you have rational faculties in a not God world? In a God world, it's a cakewalk to understand how we have rational faculties, because we're simply imbued with those rational faculties because God makes us to be like himself. But they want to believe that we can have rational faculties by simply happenstance. Good. Explain to me how you can. I'm proving the existence of God through a reductio ad absurdum. But you see, they refuse to even defend their position. They constantly want to maintain, either explicitly or more likely implicitly, they are just neutral bystanders, and you haven't made your case that there's gold on the surface of Mars. This is faulty reasoning on their part. They are not neutral bystanders. We're not neutral. They're not neutral. Nobody's neutral. At any given moment, we're either presupposing the creator-creature distinction, or we are presupposing the brute factness of all facts. Well, they just are, right? What we're trying to show is we make a case for God's existence. This stuff, God reveals himself. No, he doesn't. Say, fine, have it your way. When you conclude, no, that isn't, that's a counterclaim. But that counterclaim cannot be grounded. It can never be defended. It's absolutely an absurd claim. That's how we show that our self-conscious awareness is all the proof we need of God, because the non-acceptance of that destroys your ability to be a self-conscious, rational person. But they don't care. Okay? Listen, keep this in mind. Not only are they not neutral, we are not dealing with people who are seeking the ultimate truth. They say they are, but they are lying. And their verbal and their demeanor shows this every single day. They're constantly dealing with they're constantly deploying obfuscation, misdirection, deception, right? Prevarication. This happens every single day. Now, they start off being cordial, but it doesn't take a lot of time when you go down a list of questions about their position that they quickly go into deceptive tactics. Now, why would somebody who is honestly and earnestly seeking what the ultimate truth, why would they go into deceptive tactics? Why? It's because their position is being exposed for the fraud that it is.
They don't want to know actually the truth. They don't want God. What they want is a justification for their unbelief.
Well, here's the problem. How do you have a justification for anything in a not God world? if you start without God and say, prove to me God, right? You're already presupposing that proof and justification are viable concepts from a starting of a not God starting point, but just saying, oh, I'm open to you showing me God tomorrow. How does anything they say make sense? What we're showing them is no matter what evidences we present them, they're going to go, And so what we have to show them is that the is actually a metaphysical counterclaim. Now, they're not going to want to acknowledge that it is, but it is. If they go, if you don't accept the Christian worldview, that this entire world is revelatory of God, God has constructed all the facts of existence, including our self-consciousness and our conscious acquisition of our self-consciousness and all the things in the world, that this is revelatory of God, because if it wasn't, we couldn't be self-conscious rational beings, right? When they go, as soon as they go, that is just a very subtle counterclaim.
I think that's a Jurassic Park name, to be fair.
What's that?
I think that's a Jurassic Park name.
I can't understand you.
Didn't say the magic word. Well,
I didn't understand
English.
Repeat.
Just the way you say
Yeah, is a counterclaim. If somebody says
no.
Is just saying no, I don't accept what you're saying. Now, if I tell you there's gold on the surface of Mars and you say, I don't accept that, that's not a counterclaim. Because gold on Mars is not in the category of a transcendental necessity, where God is within the category of a transcendental necessity. Because you see, the unbelievers have a Greek philosophy outlook. They do not hold to the creator-creator distinction. They're just conceptualizing God hypothetically for the sake of argument that he's just simply the prime mover, but he's not the creator. Okay? They only will think of God as creator in terms of an Aristotelian prime mover, but not the source and basis of all possibility.
Why does thought have to be grounded in Aristotelian? Why do we have to base our thought on what Greeks thought?
I didn't understand what you said.
I mean, I'm speaking basic English. I'm asking why does
Dude, listen to me. Of course you're speaking. Listen to me. Listen to me. You hear me talking? Of course you're speaking in basic English, but I'm having trouble because okay, get out of here. Okay, you're gone. Get out of here. Okay.
George,
the guy spoke with an accent, and it was difficult to understand him. And I'm trying to get this across. I'm not trying to be a jerk.
Darth, what was that second book you recommended by Bahnsen? You said Pushing the Antithesis, and what was the other one?
Against All Opposition. Now, there's overlapping material in both of them, but they're both good to read. Do you have copies of that?
I believe it's in the drive you sent me, right?
Yeah, it should be in the Bahnsen folder.
Against All Opposition, and read Pushing the Antithesis first, then Against All Opposition.
Well, I would start. Okay, this is the order that I would start in. Okay. Now, you don't have to start in this any order. It's just a recommendation. Start with Every Thought Captain. Then read Pushing the Antithesis, Against All Opposition. These are really easy books to read. Okay, very easy to read. Then read Always Ready. Then read Presuppositional Apologetics, Stated and Defended. Okay? Once you digest that, if you're hungry for more, then you can go to even a greater expounding on it in Van Til's Apologetic. Okay? So Van Til's Apologetic by Greg Bahnsen is his, I'll say magnus opus about Van Til's Apologetic. It includes some biographical material, but it mostly is expounding his apologetic, where Van Til, an analysis of his thought by John Frame, includes Van Til's Apologetic, but to a greater degree, it expands on Van Til the man and his thought on a wide range of things. And both of these books are very complementary to understand Van Til's thinking. And by the way, both books point out that if you just dive into reading Van Til's books, it's not easy, and some of these things may just make your eyes glaze over. It's a mistake to do it.
It was definitely hard. And then also too, because one of the criticisms I've heard from Greg Bahnsen is he doesn't really go into the Trinity as much in his apologetic. Have you noticed that, or do you think he does?
Well, yeah, but you see, you have to understand. Yeah, well, everybody has their forte, and I'm sure that if Van Til had lived another 50 years, he would have spent more time doing that. But thankfully, we have something like by Bosserman.
He goes more in depth on one to many.
Yeah. Van Til expounds on the one and the many, which is an important concept. The point is simply this: is once you get a basic understanding of the biblical presuppositionalism explained by Van Til's best students, by Frame and by Bahnsen, okay? Then when you go to start reading Van Til, which it's a worthy goal, then certain sections in his book that are hard to understand or might not interest you in terms because of his vast expertise in philosophy, you can skim through some of those passages and then get onto the more meaty passages where he's getting into. See, the problem with Van Til is although his books are good, right? He never really presented a complete top to bottom systematic presentation, which Bahnsen attempted to do. Okay, so Van Til has his strengths and he has his weaknesses, but some of the material I'm actually enjoying. It's worth it to me to slog through certain of Van Til's books, including certain chapters that make my eyes glaze over, to get to a chapter or a paragraph that is just rich with gold and jewels of biblical ramifications of certain things. Like, for example, in the one book I'm reading now called The Protestant Doctrine of Inspiration or Scripture, he talks about that from the creator-creature distinction, one will either adopt an open or a closed system metaphysically. And I'm like, wow, I never thought of it that way. And he said, in God's world, it's a closed system because we have an unchanging God who then implements a plan of creation. And certain things can happen and certain things cannot happen because he has a sovereign providential plan. But when that is rejected, then what you're left with is an open system where there is nothing that is ultimate, that is dictating anything. Nor would you have access to identify what that was. And consequently, any new fact could appear tomorrow to displace or falsify a fact that you held yesterday. And then the same thing could happen ad infinitum. So that in an open system of a metaphysic, truth and falsity are inaccessible. You might believe that something is true, but tomorrow you may have an observation that it wasn't. Suppose today you believe it's true that you saw your grandfather die, but then when he shows up the next day and just saying, oh, they thought I was dead, but I wasn't, okay? And another thing is this, he points out that if you adopt an open system, then you have to be closed to the closed system, which is a contradiction in terms. And I'm reading this from Van Til, and I'm going, this guy's a genius. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
I mean, I think that's an additional layer of problem here. So,
okay, but just keep in mind what we're talking about here is every bull crap that's coming out of their mouth, every statement of fact is being governed by their philosophy of fact, and they're making a determination as to what propositions should be valued, which propositions should be devalued, what propositions should be accepted, which ones should be rejected. But this is all a product of their autonomous reasoning, that the mind of man, unaided by God, not being a creature of God, right? That man, through inductive reasoning in a world, that we can collect the facts, and then we can come up with classes, categories, and universals, up, down, black or right, right or wrong. But the point is, they simply can't. Their autonomous reasoning, which they refuse to acknowledge, is analogous to somebody falling off a cruise ship in the middle of the Atlantic, and nobody knows you fell off, right? And nobody's going to know for days that you fell off. And you're in the middle of the Atlantic, and you think by the power of your own determination that you can swim to shore. Okay? It's an impossible task, right? Well, autonomous reasoning is an impossible endeavor because you could never, through an inductive survey, understand how everything ties together or how anything is correlated. It's just hopeless. You have to start picking beliefs arbitrarily because you want to make sense of your world. But you see, when you pick these arbitrary beliefs, right, You don't know that they're true or not. Maybe this world doesn't mean anything. So autonomous reasoning, upon examination, it's incoherent on its own terms. But you see, they don't care because they're rebellious. See, this is what happened in the garden. Adam and Eve decided that rather than respond to the revelation God had given, that they were going to determine a life-critical event through inductive reasoning. Okay? They're going to do it through their autonomous reasoning and not in virtue of some facet of God's revelation. And this is what they're doing right now. And when you bring this up to them, they don't want to talk about it, right? They go, "Oh, you're just doing a flow chart. You're just doing a precept script."
He makes this statement that is essentially the problem with this sort of hardline fundamentalist approach to the text is that I am right, everybody else is wrong, and there is no negotiation at that point because so the only answer at that point is violence. I mean, if your text tells you that you have a divine mandate, and that divine mandate you interpret in a way that leads you to impose that as much as possible, even if it's under the guise of, well, they're standing on the train tracks and the train's coming. You know, I have to get them off the road. That very quickly, if you can't be wrong about what you believe because it's divinely granted to you, that knowledge is divinely granted. Well, then there's no negotiation. There's no discussion. It's my way or...
Okay. Now, what he just brought in was the falsification criterion, right? So he's castigating and criticizing the believer's ultimate commitment to God as the ultimate truth, ontologically and epistemologically, right? And that there's no negotiation. What he's really arguing for here now is that there cannot be any belief, including an ultimate belief, that can be worthy of acceptance if it is not in principle falsifiable. But when you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Because if that's your principle, then there can't be truth. Because if your ultimate commitment or truth or belief by which you determine all other beliefs is in principle falsifiable, it might be false. Then any other beliefs that derive from that could also be false, and you will never know. So, he may have a PhD in Sumerian studies, and he may be very educated in that area, but philosophically, he's just as inept right here in what he just said as a high school student.
And if truth is inaccessible, then nothing can be falsified either. So the falsifiability criterion is just junk then.
Yeah. What he's saying is there's no belief that is immune from revision. Okay? There's no fundamental belief that should have it's irrevisable. It's immune to revision, but based upon future evaluation. But if that's the case, then nothing can be held to be true. Ever.
So it's basically either we ground
Quite
what
literally
we
that.
believe in God and take him as a reference, or we reject him and then everything lies on what we evaluate, and then the ultimate ground of
it's
reasoning
hopeless because you have to understand, because then there is no final reference point. And any most fundamental belief that you have, if it is not immune to revision, then a month from now, a year from now, 10,000 years from now, 1,000,000 years from now, it might be revised, and that will cause a cascading change of all your other beliefs that depend on it.
I mean, my framework was always, here are two ways. Either there is a God or there is no God. What makes more sense? And then you evaluate one against the other and see where the evidence leads to. And if
okay, but you know what they're going to say?
Their evaluation already has prior commitment. How can you evaluate things without a prior commitment?
Yeah, well, they're going to say, well, naturalism makes more sense to me. That's what they'll say.
Either they say that, or they say we don't know, but it's not your God.
Yeah, you're not understanding. You are not dealing with people who are truth seekers. They will make any excuse why they don't have to believe, right? Now
That's my experience.
Anyway, let's continue with this. So you see, Josh thinks he's hot stuff here because he has a PhD in Sumerian studies, but the point is he's making elementary philosophical and theological errors right here.
Play the highway. Maybe not quite literally, but
yeah. Well, if there is no ultimate truth giver, there is no ultimate, ultimate starting point, such as the mind of God and how he reveals it, then what is? But you see, they want to throw out these cliches. Well, it's my way or the highway. Well, then your way, no, his way is this, is that there's this constant appeal to collective human opinion where we do an inductive survey and then we appeal to what best explains the fact. But next week, there could be some new human beings saying, well, that's not the best way of looking at it because it's better to look at it this way. And then everyone goes, oh, now I see. And then a month later, somebody else comes along and says, well, you know what? That was a good way of looking at it. But when you look at it from this perspective, it's better than that. And then everyone goes, oh, that's right. You remember Newton's laws of gravitation? Newton's laws of celestial motion? Right? Everybody thought, wow, he was genius. It was. But now along comes Albert Einstein. Right? Now, Einstein has displaced Newton's laws of gravitation because of their greater accuracy. Okay? So this is the fatal flaw in this guy's reasoning. But the scripture's right. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools.
That's what they say is this.
Yeah, it's interesting because you kind of alluded to.
I just want to continue this.
Do it, but even if the more liberal kind of, when you pull back and say, well, some of these texts are used to informative ways, so there's people that don't take all the violence literally and stuff. And again, I'm much happier for people to be Christians like that. But then you still have the kind of question of well, why does God allow, obviously historically we can, check how people have used the interpretation of these texts over time. And then the additional question would be, okay, God knows that the texts are going to be like this and be used to do all these things and read this way for so long. It kind of, I guess you would consider it an addition to, I don't know if it would be an addition to the problem of evil or something, but it would just be another thing you'd have to explain away as to.
See, all they're doing here is because they're so pathetic in even attempting to refute the existence of the God of the Bible, is now they're going to the root is your God's nasty. You believe in a nasty God. That's all they're doing.
Maybe you're not stuck with well, God commanded these things. You're stuck with, well, God put these things in the text and confused a lot of people about the meaning of them for a long time.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's an additional. I don't want to go on a tangent about that though, because I'm interviewing you. So it seems like there's going to be multiple volumes of this. It looks.
How about this? I'm not going to suggest that this is true. What if it's the case that the evil practices were so evil that unbeknownst to let's say the Amalekites or the Canaanites, okay, that they had contracted a very serious pathogen and that it had transmitted to everyone, even to man, woman, and child, right?
Yeah, but that's speculation.
Yeah, okay. Tangelo, can I make some comments with that? You constantly interrupting. Okay?
Dude, you've literally been talking nonstop.
That's right, because this is my room, honey.
Well, don't tell that other people are interrupting you and you're not. No one's
talking. Hypa. He's been plenty of opportunity to talk, but he interrupts too much. Okay, this happens to be my channel. Were you aware of that? You understand that
yes,
I'm doing a value. Why are you over talking me? Okay. No, the point I'm trying to make to you is this is not a democracy in here. Are you aware of that? It's not one man, one vote in here. I didn't hear you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to repeat.
Mm-mm.
Okay. So do you understand that this is not a free-for-all? It's not a one vote, one for every person, every man.
Then you really should have all of the people muted so we can just hear your
Okay.
sweet voice.
Okay. No, because I want interjection from time to time. But if I feel anyone is talking too much while I'm trying to get back to the video, okay, that what I'm doing here this morning is we're doing a survey of atheists talking about atheism in the Old Testament. And I want to get back to the video. So since this is my channel, I've decided on the video, and I am welcoming people to have input. If I decide that I want to limit the amount of input so we can get back to the video, why is that a problem?
No, then maybe you need to, again, like I said, pause everybody and mute them until you want that interjection.
No, I
let
don't
people
need to
just
do
have
that. Do you know why? You know why I don't need to do that? Is because I only cited him as interrupting too much. I have given him, you see, even before you were here, okay, he was giving a lot of input, and he was given a lot of time already of putting
But he's
input,
not allowed
asking
anymore.
questions. Okay, why are you ever talking me?
Because I just got to make sure.
Okay, so you're just coming in here. You just want to throw a monkey into the wrench, and you just want to complain about how I'm running my show.
Not at all. I was actually very interested, but it gets really.
Oh, you're not
irritating when
complaining about how
people-
I run my show? It sure seems like it.
No, just that one time. But I.
Well, yeah,
forgot.
but
It's not a good
how
one.
long have you been here?
I actually just joined. It was super interesting.
Okay, so you're making evaluation. What she did, everyone in the room, is exactly what autonomous reasoning does. It does an inductive survey, and then it tries to make an evaluation of what the facts are before them without full context. So you have made an out of context evaluation. You thought I was being quick to judge Otangelo, when before you were even here, Otangelo was given many opportunities to talk, ask questions, disagree, and I felt that at this point it was a bit too much and I want to get back to the video. But you made an out of context evaluation.
May I speak now, like in actual more than just 2 sentences?
Do you agree that you made an out of context evaluation?
May I speak more than just 2
Do
sentences?
you
though,
may
before
speak, but I want an answer to
Okay,
my
then
question.
I'm going to
and then you
answer.
can-
I'm just
Did
making
you
sure
make?
that I'm going to
Yeah,
answer.
go
I'm just
ahead.
making
Answer the
sure.
question.
Okay, I'm just making sure that it's okay with you. that I
Answer the
speak
question.
More. Now,
Let
I
her
came
speak,
in.
man.
I came in, and I started listening. And while I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that you say, my faith is massively deeper than yours. So I understand the growth that you are trying to do, and I admire it. But there are some things that you are portraying, and it's.
I'm not hearing an answer to my question, so I'll repeat. I'm gonna stop you right there.
No, I asked.
Yeah,
No.
I'm
You're
good.
not going to stop
You're
me
now
because
muted.
you asked.
Okay, you're muted.
Just let him
okay?
be. It's his room.
Yeah. Now, okay, I asked you a question and you are dancing around it. Okay. Oh, and she left. Good riddance. Okay. So, ask her question. Did you make an out of context evaluation? The answer is yes, she did.
Did you hear her say, "My faith is massively deeper than yours"?
Yeah.
What does
That's
that
just
even
egotistical.
mean?
Yeah.
That's just egotistical.
Oh gosh.
I don't even know what that means.
Darth, not
Okay,
to
so-
not to be
okay.
off topic,
It's like
but I
an
saw
ocean,
your
Darth. Darth,
I
you're
saw
the
this
kitty
morning.
end
I
of the
watched your
pool.
this morning. I watched your debate with Shannon Q, and you absolutely destroyed her, bro. Like that was really good work.
Well, I appreciate that you see it my way. She was an horse's ass. But what you should do is she did an interview on the YouTube channel. I think it's called Myth Vision. Okay, go on to Myth Vision and see her interview. And very early on, she starts recounting what happened. And part of what she said is a lie, okay? But part of what she says is true, okay? Because she basically admitted that she was trolling, okay? So after you've now seen that interaction, you've seen it, you can judge for yourself, okay? You don't have to take my word for it. And compare, hold on one second. Okay. Watch that video if you can sometime today and see how she lies about what would happen. All right. Anyway, let's get back to listening to the two atheists here, the Stephen Colbert doppelganger and Dr. Josh.
It looks like.
Yeah, at least two. So, yeah, the first one, I was just going to make one big volume. It looks like right now it's going to be around 500 pages. So,
total?
yeah, I know. The first volume is about 500 pages. So I thought, plus I wanted to get it. I wanted to get at least some of it out to the public a little more quickly, and it's going to take me time. So, some of the things that will be coming in I don't know if you wanted me to wait to talk about what's actually going to be in it, or if you want me to talk about that now.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the next question was something like give a general overview of the topics you covered. So you can just go ahead and start with that.
So at first it was going to be just, let me talk about in more detail and in written form some of the more popular or important videos I think that we've put out on our channel. So like something like the dating of Daniel. But then I thought, well, if this is going to be a true handbook, I think it needs to be a little more, comprehensive. So what that meant to me was I want people to understand what the canonical stories are in the Bible. Like, one of the things that I think atheists run into and skeptics run into in these discussions is they don't know things like who the Amalekites are, or what it means that Abraham wandered around or moved around a lot in Canaan, or and because they don't know these sort of little details that maybe in the broad scheme of things don't matter, it I don't know, in debates or in discussions, it just automatically makes it that much harder for them to get their point across. So the first chapter is essentially telling the canonical story of the Old Testament. So I've broken it. I was going to do the whole thing from creation to the return after the Babylonian exile, but I decided, since there's going to be 2 volumes at least, that I'll do the first half of that story in volume 1 and the second half in volume 2. So the first chapter of volume 1 takes the story from Genesis, the creation in Genesis, right on through till Moses' death, just outside of the land of Canaan, as the book of Deuteronomy ends. And it goes through in some detail, again, focusing on not what can we say historically about this, or look, it seems like there's 2 different or 3 different wife-sister stories. We sort of ignore that stuff, and we just say, what is it that the canon says? What's the story? Because again, when a Christian comes to this, when an evangelical or Christian apologist comes to this, they're coming at it from the perspective of my story. The story is that God created the heavens and the earth
boring.
in 6 literal days.
Yeah.
So I think you have to know that. It's very useful to know that. So that's the first chapter. Chapter 2 goes into the history of the ancient Near East. And because I think, again, that's another big thing that people talk about when they say, talk about the Canaanites, and you hear about the Amarna period. What the hell is the Amarna period? Or Nebuchadnezzar. What is who is that, and where does that fit in? Who's Tiglath-Pileser III? These are the sorts of things that I think, or when somebody says, the prophecies in the Hebrew Bible are a lot like those at Mari. What the hell is Mari? So my goal was to sort of give this broad backdrop to the history of the ancient Near East. So I go from right around 3000 BCE down to Alexander's conquest.
Right.
And I think I hope that's going to be useful to everybody, to be able to sort of place, when you have these historical discussions and you say things like, well, Nebuchadnezzar is actually, a lot of things that are said about him in Daniel are about Nabonidus. Well, now you know who those 2 names are. And they're part of the Neo-Babylonian, empire. And so,
yeah. Before you keep going, though, I wanted to give a thought though too, because that's one of the I think that's valuable to kind of set the context, and like people that are
I'm gonna
interested,
fast forward
in
this.
your
This is
work.
boring.
I have archaeological
you
training. I've
sharing?
been on an archaeological day. Those first two chapters will sort of Bible in one hand, spade in the other, to discipline all its own. That this just set that stuff aside in your mind. So I'm gonna have sex with my my wife's handmaiden and have Ishmael, and all that's not going to work. And so God, you got a promise. I get a promise here, and just full administrator and as high official in the land of Egypt. And ultimately, there's a famine. Joseph talk about the laws. Like I don't really, from an apologetic standpoint, I think this is why it's important. Not so much to understand the narrative, but to understand how the apologist will often try to tie the narrative back to what we know about ancient Near Eastern history.
Right.
So knowing things, for example, like the Exodus, according to the biblical text, should be happening, mid 15th century. Well, what's going on in the mid 15th century, and why is that problematic? Why has that date sort of been bumped down to the end of the 13th century? What's going on in the ancient Near East at the time? So those are the sorts of things I think that make that interesting. Now, with that being said, I think just having a broad understanding of how the history of the East is actually really useful for sort of setting that backdrop. So, and this is just sort of showing, and so what effect that has, if you understand that in contrast to what the biblical texts want to portray is, like the Nephilim, right, being in the land, and these giants, who are in control of all these massively fortified cities. Well, that's not what we see historically. Right. What we see are these little itty bitty cities that are under the control of the Egyptians, right? You have forts, you have outposts, Egyptian forts and outposts in Canaan, and we know who they are, right? You have people like Ribadu who are, writing to the Pharaoh and saying, "Hey, I need some help because the Apiru."
Yeah, see, the mistake that he's making is that a century or two ago, the biblical authors were attacked because they mentioned the Hittite civilization. And then the Hittite civilization was discovered. Okay? So what he's saying is that if the Bible mentions something historically, but we don't have anything from secular history that corroborate it, well, then all of our historians they're just smarter than the biblical authors. So we have to assume that this stuff didn't happen or made up. I mean, this is just childish.
But he's placing the Nephilim at a time where they were not prevalent.
I know this guy's just a waste. He's just speculating. All right, I'm going to fast forward through this.
Right, and so
relatively new discipline, and
because Albright was very much, the historicity of the biblical text is reliable, but it just became apparent that this isn't working. And like Deaver has this great line, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but essentially he's talking about the conquest, the conquest model. And he says of the 38 sites, I think is what it is, of the 38 sites that are supposed to be, conquered in the conquest, only one fits, Hatzor. He said 1 out of 38 isn't very good. It's not a good ratio. And so I think, eventually people started saying, archaeologists started determining, look, this, I don't know if it's not that it's getting embarrassing, but it's like, I guess in some ways it was. I mean, I do remember talking to Near Eastern archaeologists, and you bring up biblical archaeology, and there's still this bad taste in their mouth because it's like, so when you have people like Bryant Woods, I think it's Bryant Wood, who wrote their dissertation on seriation of the pottery at Jericho to try to argue for this 1447 or 1407 conquest account at Jericho, and it's like, come on, man, like there's a reason you're all alone in this. There's a reason you're all alone.
It's kind of like there's a book, Stephen Law's a philosopher, and
So all of these smart, historians can't be wrong. That's what it is. Okay. This is ridiculous.
Found it and gave it to him, and it's got little trucks on it, like on the wrapping paper. And if you look at the flood story, how long was the flood? How many animals were supposed to go on the ark? You can get two very different answers to those questions. But in Genesis 37, it's like it's one of these ones that's very difficult to find a plausible way out of it. So if you read through the story, Joseph, this is the story of Joseph, the coat of many colors, whatever. He comes to see his brothers, and his brothers plot to kill him, and they think, let's murder him. And then they think about it and say, no, let's just throw him into a pit and, let nature take its course. And then they sit down to eat, having thrown him into a pit, and they see this band of Ishmaelites coming by, these merchants going down to Egypt, and they say, aha, let's not kill him. Come on, we're not animals.
Mm-hmm.
Let's sell him and turn a profit, right? And then we can pretend that he got killed.
Right.
And so it makes sense so far. Well, then the text says, but while they sat down to eat, some Midianites came by and found Joseph in the pit and pulled him out and sold him to the Ishmaelites. And you go, okay, we can make that work. The NIV tries to make it work by, the Hebrew says, the Midianites came by and it doesn't have another subject. Right. It just says, and they pulled him out.
Mm-hmm.
The NIV says, and the Midianites came by and the brothers pulled him out. Well, it doesn't have the brothers in the text. They're just trying to make sense of it.
Right.
Canonical form. But you even not doing that, you could probably sort of make that make sense. Like, okay, the brothers are eating.
Does anybody hear anything remotely substantive here? This guy has a PhD, and this is the kind of crap that he's delivering. All right, we're going to have to find another video. Yeah, this guy is as boring as the day is long. Let's see if we have another video.
I haven't watched the video yet, but there's a 3-minute video called "Why All Religions Can't Be True." This guy on the stage giving a seminar. But I guess what he's saying is why, he's really arguing for atheism, I guess.
All right, I'll be with you guys in a second. I'm trying to find an appropriate video.
What's up, abstinence? I spoke to you yesterday, yeah? I was muted and definitely can't hear me. I mean, so why did you want Hyper Bumfuzzle out of here? I know she's not a troll. I didn't know it was her when I said to let her speak. But open discourse is a good thing. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm getting a question from someone that they're asking. How Christians would feel about some of their teachings being almost word for word the same as the Book of the Dead from Egypt. I mean, yeah, I don't know about that, but that's the question.
I'd ask for specifics.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I'll ask them.
I suppose that being that Israelites were captive to the Egyptians for 430 years, the Egyptians have probably heard some of the Israelite teachings and have probably tried to mimic and copy what
Did
they
the
have
Egyptians
been
not predate
teaching.
them? Or have I got my timeline wrong?
They do not predate the Israelite people. They weren't from Israel originally, but Adam and Eve were the first people. There was nobody to predate them, and they were not Egyptians. Well, they were from near that area, though. They were from, I think, the Garden of Eden, modern day Iraq is what the area would be called, from the Garden of Eden.
I believe there was
Are you talking about the Caucasus?
I don't know that this is a direct descendancy, but there is a child of Ham, I believe, that is named Egypt. So that would be a plausible lineage.
Absolutely.
I guess my follow-up to that, off the top of my own head, would be there's a lot of commonalities between a lot of different world religions, not just religions, but also like superstitions, if you want to call it that, like worldwide. There's a lot of commonalities.
The devil likes to copy what works.
Well.
Yeah, they're
I mean,
counterfeits.
when Christianity was spreading across Europe, didn't Christianity kind of induct sort of local pagan beliefs into their belief in the form of demons?
So the doctrine hasn't changed, but the church incorporated some pagan holidays and sprinkled in some Christian spice on top of that.
Because that was one of the ways they kind of brought them on board, so to speak. So they let them keep some of their holidays and some of their but their deities were relegated to the status of demons.
Well, demons are not
keeping their holidays was part of it was part of how they convinced them to jump on board.
Unclean spirits are old doctrine. They've been around since the Old Testament in regard to, I believe it was King Saul. I don't know that he was the first one, but he was certainly a good example. King Saul was influenced by an unclean spirit, and David would actually play the lyre for him, which would help him for some reason. But
I don't know the Bible
not,
well enough to know the David reference, but sorry, go on.
Demons are not a new thing. That was not something that was
no. I know that this is from a 14th century book that I read. And it's from 14th century. That sounds too old. It might be more recent than that, but it was. It might have been more recent than that, but it was about 14th century demonology. And so you've got like the beast with a million noses, and you got flibbity gibbets. That's that's an
Well,
actual name of
some of the
you know.
beliefs about the nature of demons were pagan, but the concept
Yeah.
of the unclean spirit is a biblical concept.
I mean, yeah, when you say the unclean spirit, like you're obviously referencing a specific entity there.
Well, there are multiple. There are multiple mentioned unclean spirits, but for example, when Jesus exorcised the demoniac, the demon called itself Legion, for it was many.
Oh, well,
So
we are Legion. Yeah, I know that as a meme, but I don't know the correlating biblical verse.
it was from when Jesus cast out the demons from the demoniac.
From where, sorry?
Well, he's referred to as the demoniac. He was a person who was
okay.
living. I forget the place, but he was possessed by multiple demons. So the demons
Well, I mean,
announced
if Jesus was
themselves as
casting them out, he was probably in Jerusalem, right?
no, it
or did he
wasn't.
travel around a lot?
Jesus traveled a lot.
Okay.
But yeah, that's where that comes from.
Well, yeah, I mean, if he's called the demoniac, then that obviously, then we've got some etymology there on the word demon. But,
well, he's not called that in the scripture. That's just what he's referred to as colloquially. But
okay, yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, the way I'm given to understand it is that when Christianity was spreading across Europe, obviously there's a lot of I don't know how to put it, but I mean, you've got tribes, you've got villages, and a lot of stuff was nature based. You know, before like, you know, worldwide religions, a lot of stuff was nature based. So I mean, you pray to your local trees, and then you get what you need, type thing. And the way I understand it is that so when Christianity was spreading, part of how they got these people on board is that initially they weren't touting it as a monotheism. So they let these smaller peoples keep their sort of nature gods and that. And they said you can still worship your local nature gods, but as long as you acknowledge that you know, God is he's the uber god, he's the over god, he's the one true God. But the others are lesser deities. And then later on, as time passed, then you know, these deities were relegated to the status of demons.
That wasn't.
This might be more contemporary than I'm thinking. I'm saying 14th century. I think it was probably Georgian period, but it was referencing 14th century. If that makes sense.
You're not wrong. So the Catholic Church would adopt.
Çok haklısın.
The Catholic Church would bring in different pagan peoples by sort of enticing them with their already current pagan beliefs.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that
So letting them keep their gods as long as they acknowledge that there was that God was higher than them.
But that doesn't make it Christian doctrine. So that's actually problematic from a Christian standpoint, because the Bible says you
I understand
have
that.
no other gods.
It's interesting topic.
Yeah. So you are correct. There was some paganry going on in the early Catholic Church, or the Middle Ages Catholic Church, but that wasn't. That was less of a.
Hello. Sorry, go on, mate.
That was less of a doctrinal thing and more of a expediency thing. I don't know how to describe it.
I mean, try, because this is why I'm asking, is because I'm not well read on it, any of it. So.
Aksanı bak. Ateist yardım hattı.
So the books, the actual Christian doctrine was unaffected by this period. Those remained.
No, because I know. But as long as they acknowledged that God was, he was higher than their deities, and they were lesser gods.
You have an open mic.
So that very well may have been a tactic they used, but it is not biblically correct to do. You can't.
Oh no, I'm not alleging it is.
I know, but look, there were some shenanigans that went on at that time that were not biblical. Is what I'm trying to highlight, I guess.
Okay.
You have an open mic. Mute your microphone.
Who's got an open mic?
All those.
Yeah, I mean, don't worry about that, because I'm interested in this topic because it's one of the few things that I've done a tiny bit of research into.
Age 49 to 63 and not able to work? This message is for you. New rule.
I'm going to give you 100% proof that God does not
this guy's
exist.
playing ads now. do you know about the cult of Dusty?
What was that?
Do you know about cult of Dusty? He's
I'm not
he's I mean, in certain circles, he's a fairly well-known atheist, and you know, his catchphrase was "facts and logic." You know, before Ben Shapiro popularized that.
Cult of Dusty isn't really worth listening to at all. He doesn't provide any good arguments at all.
Yeah,
He just,
I mean, I only know of him as someone who's laughed at. So,
like, he just makes videos of him yelling at how Christianity.
yeah, that
really...
sounds about right. It sounds about right. Now, the clan of Dusty, that's something completely different. That's like a cultish following and meaning on him, you know, being tangential to white supremacy. But I mean, it's not true, but it's, you know, that's the meme.
Okay. For all you Christians in here and theists, we're going to watch a video that is going to show us 100% proof that God does not exist.
Are you going live?
I'll get my popcorn.
Get your popcorn out, and here we go.
I'm going to give you 100% proof that God does not exist. We're going to lay this to.
By the way, this guy's a big fan of Mona Lisa. Notice the shaved eyebrow.
I mean, I'm not religious, but even I can say that's a dumb assertion.
How do you like his shaved eyebrows? That's the Mona Lisa look.
To rest once and for all. Now, is this even possible? Can you prove that God doesn't exist? A lot of people think it's not possible. Even many atheists think that it's impossible to prove that God doesn't exist, though they believe that it's highly unlikely that he does. So, is it possible? Yeah, it is. The truth is, it's actually pretty easy to prove that the God of the Bible doesn't exist.
No bait and switch. Did you see that? Everybody see that?
So what? So what? He's saying the.
What he just no. He went from
incorrect, but
he went from saying
but,
that. Oh, shut up!
Initial. Well, no, I'm asking you, bro. You asked.
Okay. Yeah.
So
he's
walking back.
You are okay. You are muted. So he went from saying that proving God doesn't exist to the God of the Bible. This is classic atheist bait and switch.
exist. The problem is that most people aren't smart enough to understand the proof. Not only am I going
I guess maybe if we all shaved our eyebrows like you, we would be smart enough.
to give you 100% proof right now that the God of the Bible does not exist, but by the end of this video, I'm going to show you that something does exist that's stranger than you could have possibly imagined.
Now, this guy's got long hair, he's very thin, and he shaves his eyebrows. Now, why do you think he does that?
Wait, what are you getting at?
Well, maybe he's one of these closet transvestites.
So, are you smart enough to understand? Let's begin. I have faith in you.
This guy's giving off a Satanist vibe, not gonna lie.
Morgan, we are here to wake up the world. The idea of the God of the Bible is an attack on rational thinking. So join our war of the mind.
Wait a minute. I gotta play that back. Did he just say the God of the Bible is an attack on rational thinking?
Yes, he did.
My name is Morgan. We are here to wake up the world. The idea of the...
Wait a minute. His name is Morg.
This guy is terrifyingly.
This guy, his name is Morg.
He's definitely emo.
His name is Morg. His first and his middle name are Rigor and Mortis.
Of the God of the Bible is an attack on rational thinking.
I like the fact that he acknowledges that the only God who's a threat is the God of the Bible.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, where do they grow these people? The God of the Bible is an attack on rational thinking. Oh, I can't wait to hear this colossal jewel of glittering ignorance.
So join our war of the mind by subscribing now. And my content is controversial, so make sure you hit the bell so you know when new information comes out. When it comes to proving that God does not exist, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, do you know what a proof is? I mean, how could someone know if I proved that God doesn't exist if they don't know what a proof is in the first place? You see, most people, when they say prove it to me, don't actually mean prove it. What they mean is convince me or show me empirical evidence. Now, this is completely different from a rational proof. People are convinced of things that aren't true all the time. I mean, look at all the people that are convinced that the earth is flat. Holy fucking shit. So the first thing we need to know is that a rational proof is not the same thing as convincing someone or providing empirical evidence. A rational proof is more powerful than either of these. Someone can be convinced of something that isn't true at all, and empirical evidence never results in certain truth, but only in
Anybody feel like the camera's too close to his face?
probability.
He kind of sounded intelligent until he had to drop the F-bomb for no reason.
Yeah, there's no reason to do that. Okay. Yeah, this guy's an idiot.
Rational proof, when its premises are true and it's used correctly, of course, results in 100% certainty. So let's look at a few examples to see the difference. Now, induction based on empirical evidence.
Where does he get that in his world, if something's rational, that therefore it's true?
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking we got a tranny here. He's an on again, off again, with the long hair. He's incredibly skinny. He's a weirdo, shaved eyebrows.
Now
And
hold
so
on,
it goes
Darth.
like,
I can play What Is That after the video.
we'll cue the match game. What is that?
this. Let's say that I observe 100 white swans. Then, because of my repeated observations, I conclude that all swans are white. Well, is my conclusion 100% certain? No, it only has a probability of being true. At any time, a black swan may come along and obliterate my conclusion, even though it had empirical evidence supporting it. In fact, this actually happened. People used to think, based on empirical evidence, that all swans were white, until black swans were discovered in Australia in 1697. So, in contrast, now let's look at an example of a rational deductive proof. Premise 1, all humans are mortal. Premise 2, Socrates is a human. Conclusion that Socrates is the premises must never guaranteed empirical evidence. Both of these are flawed. It's about to identify what God are we talking about. Do we mean Zeus?
What's that?
I said, let's get to the argument.
Yeah, this guy is very pendentic.
I mean, so far he's actually correct. Empirical evidence is not going to get you to certainty on anything.
Well, who's his target audience? Fifth graders?
1. We can't prove something doesn't exist if we don't know what we're referring to. Well, here we're specifically talking about the God of the Bible.
Okay, now it's bait and switch, okay? Because if you say God, that's going to include all creator God concepts, not just simply the God of the Bible. See, this guy's doing bait and switch.
Now, this God isn't just some abstract cosmic force. He has a personality and very specific attributes as laid out in the Bible. According to Orthodox Christianity, this God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving. To prove that this God doesn't exist, all we have to do is prove that he is not one or more of these attributes. And this is easily
I see
done.
where this is going.
How lame
This is the same. This is the same adolescent reasoning, and he thinks he's clever. Isn't it embarrassing that people like this guy thinks he's smart?
God doesn't comport to my morals, so he must be evil or something.
I wonder if he's going to take into account the Christian world, Christian answer, how God is loving and all these things happen. I wonder what his answer is going to be.
Now he's gonna do an external critique most likely. Probably.
Hey, Brojo, you're gonna be waiting for a long time, dude.
Done. All we have to do is point out that God allows people to go to hell. According to Orthodox Christianity, hell.
Well, he's convinced me. I'm done. Guys, I am now an atheist.
By the way, it's not like God allows them to go to hell, like they just trip and fall down a hole. Yeah. He sends them there.
Whoops-a-daisy.
For a minute, I thought he was going somewhere with this.
Wow, you know what? I really thought that this guy was going to be a buffoon, but you know what? He's really turned out to be an intellectual tour de force. I'm telling you, he's changed my mind, folks. I'm now Darth Dawkins, the atheist.
Hell is the worst fate imaginable.
I was going to say that list of attributes he gave was not a complete. I believe one of them was all loving. Was that one of them? He said.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Right. So he ignores God's justice. Right. He ignores God's other attributes.
Yeah. This is the infantile mentality in an adult body.
I say go into the comments and invite him in. Drop a Discord link.
Well, somebody do that. Yeah, bring him in here.
Well, it's
I'll bet you anything that this guy, is an on-again, off-again tranny.
Of torture. So since God allows people to go to hell, this means either he is not all loving, because no being of infinite love would allow souls to be tortured for.
Right, so now he's not talking about the Christian God anymore.
Oh gosh. With you guys in a second.
For all eternity. Or he is powerless to stop this from happening, in which case he is not all powerful.
He's powerless to stop it.
By the way, Darth, your suspicion was correct. He is a transvestite.
And how did I guess that? How did I guess that?
We need to get Tippy Bear in here to detect it.
Oh yeah, well Tippy Bear has her LGBTQ alphabet soup radar with fresh Energizer batteries. No, it's just okay. So why no eyebrows? Well, that's so he can put on makeup and create whatever eyebrows he wants through makeup techniques. He's got the long skin hair, and you know what the dead giveaway is? Look how old he is, and look how thin he is. Right? Okay.
Wow, that's interesting.
Trannies and homosexuals tend to be obsessed about their weight. Yeah. So how did you figure he was a tranny? Did you go into his other videos?
What was that? Sorry.
Did you go into his other videos?
There's a lot of people saying that reality isn't.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. This guy. Oh gosh. Let's see here.
It's always these people that are so clearly out of touch with reality that want to tell you what reality really is.
I know. Oh gosh. Look, some of his videos have 24,000 views.
There's one
Oh my god.
There's one video of his called "Why You Don't Exist."
Oh, there's one called "Man or Woman."
I'm looking at this now. Okay. All right, we gotta take a look at this one.
We gotta get this guy an invite.
All right, hold on. Okay, good. Okay, so it's showing up. Okay.
Are you a homeowner? Have you?
For a second there, I thought you were gonna say, "Are you a homo?"
That's what I was thinking. Not gonna lie, I thought that as well. Oh, that's funny.
Yes, I am wearing a dress. Mind blown. I know. I'm sure this video is going to piss off a lot of people, and I'm going to lose subscribers because of it, but I don't really care. I know that some of you, when you see me wearing a dress, probably automatically think...
Bro, Joe, have you ever been in a car and you drove by an automobile accident and you just had to look?
Man,
you can't help but look. Wow, I said, look at that crash! Wow, look at that crash. Okay, that's what's going on here.
think it's funny, right? You think it's a joke, you want to laugh, but really think about why that is. I mean, if I were a woman wearing a t-shirt or something associated with being a male, it wouldn't be funny. So why is it funny?
Man,
Me in
shut
a
up.
male
Don't try
body.
to convince us that what you're doing is right. I'm sorry. So get out of here. Come on. You are wicked, bro. Oh my goodness.
Well, this is what happens when you abandon God. Then anything goes. You know, whatever you want. You know.
Body wearing a dress. Why is that a joke?
Good question.
You ever think about it? Well, it's because women are treated as inferior to men. And so when someone in a male body wears a female article of clothing, it's automatically seen as that man lowering their social status.
They did.
No, it just is that you're a kook and a pervert and a nutbag.
So it's seen as funny because it's like they're losing some of their power by putting on some clothing that signifies.
Look, this video has had 40,000 views. 40,000 views!
Femininity. So this world hates femininity. This world puts women on a lower pedestal than men.
Okay,
all right, I can't take any.
Think about that. Because you don't like that a man is walking around and parading himself as a woman, therefore you hate femininity. No, you love femininity, which is why you're opposed to that. But once you've accepted any of the 3 treasonous sins, you have to accept them all. You always have to accept them all.
How do people get this warped? Could somebody explain that to me?
I think.
Oh, Darth, don't forget to send me that thing for the Discord audio.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll upload it to my drive. I'll do that this afternoon. I'm just trying to find one more funny video because now we know this guy's a total Fruit Loop.
Honestly, the whole world is tending toward this level of depravity, which is concerning.
Let's see. I'm going to do one more of this freakazoid.
And I love that he says he doesn't care that people are going to judge him, yet he makes a video so that he can get sympathizers.
One of the videos I saw you pass.
I gotta go, guys. I got a phone call.
All right, see you later.
Guys, you must know the gospel, by you are saved. Read 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4. Believe the gospel. Okay. You know, here's the sad thing about our society, and what's really sad about some of these videos. We're not, at least me, I'm not attempting to bash these people or spread any form of hatred, although I hate what they're doing and have even contempt for them into a godly degree, and a biblical love. But the point is, a man cannot parade himself as a woman. Sin is so stupid now that men are actually getting on YouTube and television, and they're expecting us to acknowledge them as what they are not. I mean, how depraved is our society? In the next 10 years, as Dillahunty pointed out, pedophilia will go from the thinking to actions, and we're not gonna have any complaint about that in the next 10 to 20 years. Because once you accept one of them, you have to accept the rest of them. And if any of you have seen my interaction with Dillahunty, well, that's exactly what I was pointing at. I said any of these arguments used to accept any of them are going to be used to accept all of them.